shining star. No matter who you are, shining bright to see.
Welcome to Spiritual Badass TV, Dr. Michael Likey.
Hey,
And Michael has a very moving story to tell, literally because it's about moving, but it's moving in the sense that it's a story of following inner guidance, which we can all do more of, and we all need inspiration in that area. So what happened? You were living elsewhere. You were living a totally different life, and give us a little background. And
sure.
yeah,
Well, it's a long time ago. We're talking at least 22 years ago when I relocated here to the west coast of Canada, a city called Vancouver. And it's a very beautiful city. All my life, I grew up in Montreal and went to Dawson College and studied to be a graphic designer. And subsequently, I was in advertising and I was an illustrator. I still am. I don't want to talk in terms of was, because I am all that and less. And subsequently moved to Toronto, worked again at graphic design, became a published cartoonist as well along the way in papers across Canada. And this is what I knew. I knew graphic design, I knew advertising, illustration was very, very exciting. Decided finally after a couple of years to move to Winnipeg, which I loved. It was just a city that I felt I fit in, and it fit me. I loved it, even though they have 6 months of winter virtually. I know Winnipeggers will be watching this, and they'll go, no, we don't have 6 months. We have 8 months. And it goes down to 40 below with minus 40 wind chill. But just as cold as the atmosphere is, the people are warm. Everything that I had to offer them, they embraced. So they embraced the graphic design, they embraced the cartooning. At that point, I was also a professional magician, which I still love. I still do most of those things, just not for a living. And wow, I loved the city just as much as they loved me. They gave me, who's they? It sounds like a conspiracy. I was on television out there.
it's a positive
I think
conspiracy.
Indeed. What is happening in the universe? And so I was on television for 9 years as well. A lot of Winnipeggers, 22 years later, still remember me. They still seem to celebrate me. I'm very grateful for that. I roll my eyes, but I roll my eyes because, like, me? Really? Why celebrate me? But nonetheless, I'm thankful. And in fact, went back a few years ago to do a series of book signings out there. Around 93, everything seemed to wrap up. The TV show I was doing for 9 years wrapped up. They used to take a break for a year. They really changed their policies about having kids shows on there. Another person whose TV show I was on for 3 years on broadcast television went belly up. And all my accounts seemed to go belly up, like belly up to the bar, and which I did a lot back in those days as well. And so it seemed like things were wrapping up there. By then I was divorced and started to consider my life, because I thought, well, do I really want 40 below? I'd been to New York, I'd been to Florida, I'd been to Bahamas, and well, maybe one day I'll move somewhere warm. I wasn't ready yet, or thought I wasn't ready, and picking, not with a dart and a blindfold, ended up picking Vancouver, the only city in Canada that has relatively temperate climate, beaches. Oh, it's really fantastic.
That formerly glamorous life where everything was going well was starting to cave in a little bit, and this happens to a lot of people, and it's really easy to go into fear, to go into a tailspin over it, like, what's going to happen next? I thought I knew what my life was about. I thought I knew where my bread was, coming from, where my bread's getting buttered, whatever. So did you fall into the fear mode like most humans do?
I did.
And that's where the drinking comes in, right?
Well, I was drinking anyway, but and that was kind of part of my lifestyle anyway. But to be honest, yes, I won't lie. I won't lie to myself or anyone. I panicked. My first instincts when I lost all of my accounts and things were wrapping up was, okay, let's scamper and get more crap together. I recorded an album, another album, my second album of music, and I did go into fear, even though I was meditating for a number of years up until that point. You think, okay, I'm grounded, I know what I'm doing, but one January, I contacted a friend of mine in Vancouver, and of course, he's saying to me, "Oh yes, Mike, I'm wearing my shorts. The flowers are blooming, and I'm looking out my window in Winnipeg, and like there's snow and there's a blizzard." And so that further encouraged me to explore. No, I ran to Vancouver, Canada, in short fashion, because I'm not very tall, and so. I packed up my bags and I moved sight unseen. I'd never visited Vancouver before. And normally that would be what I would do. I would just trust the universe. There was an innate trust in me that just be spontaneous, because the more spontaneous you are, the more God guided you are. You're more guided by the universe as opposed to being more in your head. So even back then, I had an inkling of something, and packed up and took my girlfriend at the time. We stayed with my friend and his girlfriend for about a month until we got on our feet. Boy, was it culture shock, Deb. I went from one series of panics and traumas to, oh, Vancouver isn't at all what I thought. Because I had planned, I actually built sets and decided in my head, I'm going to do exactly what I'd been doing for years in Vancouver, what I'd been doing in Winnipeg. So I figured, oh, dress up in my medieval garb. People are going to love this. My girlfriend as well will do face painting and balloon animals and magic and caricatures and make a fortune in Gastown, lovely cobblestone street area. So I come and we packed up the van. I pretty much fit whatever I could in the van, trusting the universe will provide. Part of me thought, okay, I'll give most of my stuff away, 6 rooms of furniture, to worthy or not worthy, needy people. And we drove out here. It was several days. And no, it didn't feel right. Initially, it was like, holy Toledo, Batman, what have I done? People felt and looked differently. Now, it could have been because of what I was going through, the couple of years I didn't take the time to heal. So, and I was probably being oversensitive, but everyone seemed to have steel cold blue eyes, and they seemed to be expressionless as opposed to filled with creativity and expressiveness, which I was kind of used to in Montreal, Toronto, and Winnipeg. It was a whole other, it seemed, ball of wax, and I didn't like it. I felt fear again, and it's like, holy crap, I charged my credit cards, I got 60 grand in debt. I can say that. It's because it's true. And put all my money, so to speak, into Vancouver, into the final frontier, so to speak. And after a month passed, or during this month, my friend introduced me to places where he busked. Yes, he busked. I didn't know really what busking was. I'd heard about busking, and I thought, wow, that's brave of him, living in the most expensive city in Canada. He introduced me to places where I could set up and do caricatures or God knows my other stuff. And none of it was really working. More panic. We're into September, October. I'm 60 grand in debt. The time is ticking. Yikes. I was worried. I was nervous. I was getting more panic, breathing, meditating. But nonetheless, I know all of this was happening for. But sometimes when we're in something, particularly me, I'm dense. Unless, back then anyway, unless somebody knocks me upside my head and goes, hey, Mike, you should be doing this. And no one was doing that. No one was, I was relying on my inner guidance, which I wasn't too aware of at the time, 22 or 23 years ago.
Well, it's hard to hear your inner guidance when you're freaked out. That's the thing, right? It's a vibrational resonance. So when we're scared and worried about survival, we can't really hear it because it's that small voice. It's a quiet voice, right?
Exactly. So I went to the places that he suggested where he himself busked, and really $80 here and there for doing caricatures. That's not going to pay off my debt load. I suspect too, I had created a clog, what I call a clog, which is in all my books as well. What we're talking here in panic, there's kind of a block where we're unable to receive messages, etc., from the universe, and so, or even attract things. All I was seeming to attract at the time was what panic I had in my head, what failure I had already in my head decided had befallen me. And so there's the law of attraction acting perfectly, just acting. It's not intelligent, it's a law, but it all depends what you do with it, right? One day, after several months going every single day to Westminster Quay Public Market, which is a lovely market along the boardwalk in New Westminster, a city in suburb of Vancouver. And I was going every day and just sitting like a putz. Yes, I said putz. Because people are sniffing, they're walking by, they're looking at this guy who also feels out of place somewhat. Whereas several weeks before, I was getting $100, $200 an hour just to show up at a corporate event to do caricatures. My theory is, and I think you'll agree with me on this, I had to be stripped clean. I had to be put to a point where I had no more thoughts in my head. I was kind of clean spiritually and vibrationally. And so one day I woke up, yet another day, I believe it was a Sunday, and I'm thinking, you know what? I'm not going to go and schlep my caricature gear to New West. I pictured in my head, this came to me, this is totally divine guidance, a little tarot sign on that faux marble background in white English lettering saying tarot, along with my magic folding table. I was going to do tarot. And so I faxed the key permission. They didn't really care as long as they got the 15%. What? And I'm still grateful to them for that. And quickly did up a sign, a pretty good sign. Went only taking a minimum of props. Before I even started setting up, I'm kind of unfolding my table. There's a lineup. There's a lineup, Deb, and 5 people at least, which is more than I'd had in a month, I think. I'm probably exaggerating, but that's pretty close because they saw the tarot sign. And you bet, I found, because I had done tarot in my spare time in Winnipeg, I loved it so much, I didn't think of turning it into a career. And thus became my tarot career. People continued to line up. I made hundreds of dollars a day. The rest is history, and that it built upon itself. That led me to buy more books. People gave me more books. I was in the flow of the universe, whereas versus the panic and the freezing, literally and figuratively, as opposed to here, I'm doing service. People are wanting tarot. I'm helping them in some way to empower themselves. I'm loving it because I'd never really done it for a living. It was exciting. I'd done it for fun a lot. And things started flowing. People were literally giving me books by Marianne Williamson, Wayne Dyer, the guy that wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, which was still in its infancy back then. And I inhaled all this stuff. And there was
Unlike
such...
Bill Clinton.
It built. I eventually became a clinical hypnotherapist because I wanted to add to my modalities. Reiki, went on to reflections books in Coquitlam, doing readings, more and more readings, meditations, eventually earned my 3 doctoral titles through the University of Metaphysics, University of Sedona. So brought myself into the groove, I like to say, of the universe by eliminating panic. by eliminating this freezing, oh my God, survival mode, I think we call it, and just relaxing and just being happy and not taking anything for granted. But wow. And around that time as well, a lot of people think or might judge that I went through a really hard time, in that my whole family passed away around that time as well. It sounds like a sad country song, but it's not. It has a good ending too. My dad died, and my favorite aunt, the next day, and my uncle a year later. Within a few short years, my physical dependency on my family, the rug was pulled out, so I could depend totally on the universe, on God, and or source, or whatever word you want to call it out there. And there's nothing like it. There's nothing more satisfying. Holy Toledo!
Wow, that is amazing. And actually, there is no death. We know that. We know that they live
Yes,
on. It's just a personal loss, like, oh, they're not around anymore, and that's. But that's
totally.
amazing that you were able to access that perspective, and that it was all orchestrated. That they were cooperative components in a way to your
Totally.
expansion by leaving you. Okay, time to kick you out of the nest.
Ah, totally, totally. It's amazing how perfectly the universe fits together, like crossword puzzles or pieces of a crossword puzzle. And eventually, as time goes on and you step back and see a little bit more of the picture, it's like, this is perfect. It didn't seem perfect at the time. People could judge, say it was disasters or losses. But no, it brought me to where I am now, in essence, and hopefully, more and more. Even as a psychic or a medium, I don't really know what my future holds. I could tell everyone else. I can give them a weather forecast, a psychic weather forecast, so to speak, but or see angels and guides and all that. But for myself, girlfriend, no, I can't do that. But I don't really want to. Half the fun, trusting, and half the fun is jumping in, since I've healed myself through my various modalities. Wow. Yeah, I just trust it now, and I'm looking forward to the future. I can't wait. Bring it on.
Wonderful. You know, I always say, like, the only crisis in midlife crisis is our resistance to it. At least that was my case. My first book is about my midlife crisis. And it's only a crisis to the extent that you resist the changes. Because the
Yes,
logical mind says, this doesn't make any sense. What is going on here? But
totally.
inner guidance doesn't often make sense. So it's a journey to learn to trust it. And that's why I love hearing stories like yours, because anybody who's listening or watching might be going through some kind of crazy situation, and they can derive satisfaction from your story and go, well, there's got to be a silver lining in it for me too. I don't know what it is yet. And there is, it is a magical
Totally.
universe. And just relax, try to breathe, try to imagine that there's a good outcome, even if you can't imagine what the outcome is, that there's going to be a really cool outcome that you couldn't imagine beforehand. We can't figure stuff out sometimes, especially when we're freaked out.
Totally. Totally. And I guarantee everyone out there listening and or watching, it has awesome, I don't even call it endings, because there's no ending,
Right.
right? There's no beginning. But the outcomes, I should say, are fantastic. And I guarantee you are going to have a life like you could not imagine. And short term, unfortunately, life happens, stuff happens. Resisting, you're right, it's the worst thing. Our natural human mind wants to say no to everything, and wants to be
Yeah.
skeptical. And fine, how's that working for you? But
But the resistance
embracing,
prolongs the condition. That's,
abs-
I mean, I know that from
totally,
direct experience.
totally,
It's true. What you resist persists. It really is. It's a cliche, but it's true. And
totally.
the other thing that I love about your story is that, I could call this interview, this story, the tarot saved my life, or the tarot saved me from abject poverty, or something. But it was blissful.
Yes,
Doing tarot readings was something you loved doing, but it didn't occur to you until that moment to do it as a vocational thing, because your logical mind's like, that's not what I do these things for money.
Exactly.
You put it in buckets and categories, and so the guidance is like, hey, how about this idea? It comes out of left field, and fortunately you were able to act on it quickly. You were like, okay. So but a lot of people, they get that download and they reject it because it doesn't make sense. So I'm here telling people, go with it, even if it's crazy.
Absolutely.
Just try it out in some way that you can, that's not risky, that you feel safe with, and see what unfolds from there.
Absolutely. I can't say enough about following inspiration. Like you say, as crazy as it may sound, or as illogical as it may sound, it's going to work. I should tell people that. It's almost like our human mind is being challenged. And good, go for it. That's how I write books. That's how I create songs. It's like if I stopped and thought, okay, is the series of words and chords going to fit? Is it? No, it's like, no, just do it. And it's so exciting. What an exciting process to go with the flow, because there is no other flow to go with but the divine flow, divine inspiration, which is intuition, etc. You won't go wrong. You can't go wrong.
Yeah, it's going with the idea that there is a divine plan for your life, and you're called to do these things. And sometimes when we don't listen, it gets a little rougher. We get a little too comfortable, and it's time to move on, and the rug has to be pulled out from under you, and it feels like it's against your will, but it's really another part of you, your higher self. It's all part of you who's doing this. And I noticed when you got your guidance, this particular piece of guidance about like, hey, go do the tarot reading, it seemed like it came in a visual format. And that's really interesting because everybody's a little different. Some people get downloads like that, see something very clearly. And some people get audio guidance, like a voice, the old voices in the head gag, a voice says something. And some people, a lot of people, though, it's much subtler than that. So it could just be like a feeling or a desire that keeps returning, when you think, oh, I just keep thinking about this thing, or it just keeps showing up. Everywhere I turn, this thing is showing up. Oh, there it is again on Facebook. There it is on the side of a bus, or whatever. So it's learning to know what your particular intuitive style is, and listening to that.
Absolutely. Sometimes it comes in dreams, not for me, but generally it could come in dreams. If you have those persistent dreams, there's a reason for that. Listen to them. That's often divine guidance as well.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and it's very inspiring. And how can people get a hold of you if they're interested to see what you're up to? What's the best place for them to go?
My website is www.drmichaellikey.com, all one word. And remember, your soul's purpose changes. I just want to add that because that came to me. What you may be doing at one point in your life for a job or career is bound to change or may change. Don't panic. Go with that. Go with that divine flow. It may be completely different, but it's worth it.
Perfect way to wrap up. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Deborah. We'll see you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
You're a shining star, no matter who